What's the question?
The question is, what are your earliest memories of childhood?
My earliest memories of childhood. I remember once when we were living on Stetson Street, we had a big German Shepherd dog we called Baron Munchausen. And Baron Munchausen would, he's a big dog, you know. And I was just a little shaver, and he would jump up on my shoulders and knock me over, and then he licked my face. I remember that, and I remember once for my birthday, I got a Mickey Mouse watch. Now that was a real treat for a kid in those days. You know, they had a picture of Mickey Mouse on the face, and the arms would go around, you know, to show you had one arm for the hour and one arm for the minute. And I got mad at my brother for some reason. The very day I got this watch, and I got mad and I threw it at him. It missed him and it hit the tree that was behind him, and it smashed the thing to smithereens. And I couldn't get, I remember that, I couldn't get over it. And I remember, this was at the same, I must have been 4, maybe 5 years old. I remember Bill used to put me up to going to our next door neighbor, whose name was Hill, and we used to play with her son, who was much older than us. We called him Bunky. His nickname was Bunker Hill, you know. We called him Bunky. And his mother would bake cookies sometimes and give us a cookie. So one day we couldn't wait for her to offer the cookies, so Bill put me up to going up and ask her for a cookie. So he was too bashful. He was hiding behind a tree. So I went up to the door, unabashed, rang the doorbell. "Oh, Bobby," Mrs. Hill said, "what can I do for you?" And I said, "How are you, Mrs. Hill?" "Oh, I'm fine." "Oh, Mr. Hill?" He's good." "How's Bunky?" "Bunky is very fine."
Hello?
And
Hello?
then I said, "How are your cookies getting along?" And he said, oh, my cookies are fine," she said. She went over to the cookie jar. She gave me a cookie, and then she gave me another cookie for Bill. She said, "This is for Bill. I see he's behind a tree there." Oh, I remember a lot of things. Bill was a boy, Cub Scout, I guess it was. And he had to get a merit badge for hiking. And Dad got him a little pedometer that you clipped on your belt, you know. And it was supposed to tell you how many miles you had walked. Of course, the thing wasn't too accurate. And I went with him on this hike. And we walked from our house all the way down to Seabreeze, which had to be 5 miles. And then we walked back again. That's a 10-mile walk. And the pedometer showed we had only walked 5 miles. He was concerned that he wasn't going to get his badge, but Dad figured out from the map that it was actually 10 miles we had walked, about twice as far as the pedometer showed. And on the way back, just before we got to the house, there was a rise in the road that went up to our house. We're walking on the road and we're down on this gully just before the hill, and we heard this whoosh over our head. And we didn't know what it was, but later we found it was buckshot. And I remember telling Bill, he said, "Doug, somebody's shooting at us." And it was a farmer who had a cornfield, and he would come out with a shotgun, and he'd chase the crows away by firing a shotgun. Can you imagine that? And if we had been at the top of that hill, we may have, you know, been hit by this broadcast of buckshot. I remember that.
What about you, Grandma?
Well, following that act is a little hard. I didn't have any brothers or sister to do things with or blame things on, so I had to take the blame for everything, and the good as well. But I can remember one thing that it was my own fault that it happened, because I was riding a two-wheeler bicycle, my very first one, and they let you at school ride your bicycle as long as you followed a particular route. There were 2 routes you could go. One was straight over and then down a busy street, or you can go to the back way, which was down, over, and zigzag through a bunch of more residential streets. I always thought it was quicker to go that way because you didn't have to watch out for cars and things. So I went the back way over zigzag, zigzag. My mother had told me you really shouldn't go that way. It takes you longer. Well, I was rushing so I'd get to school on time, and I fell off my bicycle. And I did a good job on my knee, and I was crying, and this woman who lived apparently right next to where I was came out, and she took me into the house and took care of my knee, and she called my mother. And my mother came and got me. My bike was not rideable anywhere. It was all kilter.
You were always accident prone, weren't you?
Well, yeah, I usually minded my mother, but I didn't that time, and I paid the result. That was pretty crummy. Very. And then one time, also involved in school, it was quicker if you had a ride to school. But I always rode my bicycle. My mother never drove me. And one time I got a late start, and I was riding my bicycle fast to get there as usual on time, and I didn't quite get there before the bell rang, meaning you're supposed to be in your room seated by then. And I didn't. I came in late, and everybody was in their seats except me. And there was one girl who was never very nice, and she was noisy, and she was not polite, and she sang out, "Late bird, late bird, late bird, late bird," and she kept singing it on and on and on. And the teacher sent her to the office, where she really didn't want to go, but she got sent there. So anyway, I thought, well, finally, she's going to shut up. So the teacher talked to me after school and said, you know, try to come early enough so that you don't prompt there. She said, but she shouldn't have said that. You realize that. I said, yeah, I didn't think so, but... But anyway, that girl never spoke to me again. She just kind of avoided me. And I avoided her because I didn't like her anyway.
Yeah,
Where were you in school? What school you're talking about?
Oh, grammar school, Reuben A. Dake.
Reuben A. Dake?
Dake.
It was on Cooper Road.
It was on Cooper Road in Arundequoit. Yeah,
And you went to Seneca School?
Yeah, same school you went to.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, as kids, you know, we used our bike for everything, much more so than kids do today.
Yeah.
If
that's
we
right.
wanted to go anywhere, we had to get on our bike. And we didn't have a car. Dad didn't get a car until he was retired. He got a little Volkswagen, which I taught him how to drive. But that's how we got around. I had to go get the groceries. I had a big basket on the front of my bike, and I get on the grocery store and load it up with groceries, and that's how we did our shopping.
Mm-hmm.
You know. I remember once going out to the farm. The bike I had it wasn't a 26-inch, it was a 24-inch, I guess. It was a smaller bike because at the time I got it, I was the smallest of the kids, and Bill got the regular 26-inch bike. I guess that was the wheel diameter, how they measured a bike. But I went out to the farm, which is 35 miles from where we lived, with my dad. And we went out Ridge Road, and I got a flat tire. So I had to walk until we got to a garage, and the garage guy there says, well, he said, we don't fix bicycles, we only fix cars. So Dad says, well, you must have something I can get the tire off so I can get at the inner tube. So we gave him some sort of a tool, and Dad took the tire off the rim, and luckily he had a tire patch kit there you had to use. We patched it up, and with a hand pump, he pumped it back up, and we're good to go. We had my mother's stepbrother. His name is Alexander. And he was quite a bit younger than my mother, but we call him Uncle Alex. He would come down. He always had a flivver of a car. They were never much good. They always were secondhand, and they had something wrong with them, and he didn't know a thing about cars. But he'd come down to the house, and in the summertime he'd swing open the door, and Mother was upstairs getting the wash. Our washing machine was down in the basement, and one day he opened the screen door and came in, and Mother heard the screen door slam, and she thought it was us kids, you know. So she yelled down, "Strip down to your underwear." And Uncle Alex said, "Oh," he said, "that's the best offer I had today, whole day." So, yeah, he had a coupe, I remember, and it had a rumble seat. You know what a rumble seat is? You ever seen a car with a rumble seat? You don't know what that is either. Well, in the coupes they had, you know, it was a cab with two passengers, the driver and the passenger in the front. And in the back where the boot is, or the trunk, they had a latch which lifted up the back and made a seat, another seat. They called it a rumble seat. So he had this coupe with a rumble seat, and gee, Bill, he wanted to take us out for a spin in his new car, so he put us in the rumble seat. Well, it was great fun, you know. Went across the bridge. You probably remember Stutson Street, right? Bridge. You remember that? You remember anything about Rundequoit?
Yeah, I don't remember where that bridge was though.
Okay, I went across the Genesee River, and he took us across to a drugstore that was over there, and he ordered banana splits for Bill and I. No, he had to sit us up on the stool, you know. We were just little shavers, and by God, we ate that whole banana split, you know, like nobody's business. Oh God, it was delicious. We never had ice cream, you know. We didn't have the only thing we had was an ice box. We didn't have a refrigerator, so ice cream was a real delicacy. Yeah. And he said jokingly after we had whipped cream all over our mouth, you know, he said, "You want another one?" We said, "Yeah, can we?" So he dished up another one. I don't remember if we quite finished it or not.
Well,
Yeah.
very good. Let's see what one here. What were your favorite things in school, Mother?
My favorite things in school.
Well, both of you.
Well, I was always very conscientious in school. I do my homework religiously, and I always got good grades.
Listen, everybody.
I don't remember. There was a teacher that I liked in high school. He was a bachelor. He went to MIT, and how he wound up teaching at Rundequoit High, I'm not quite sure, but the guy was a brainiac, and he just liked teaching kids, I guess. So he was our physics and chemistry teacher at Rundequoit High. John Dodge, his name was. Years afterwards, I met him at a reunion, high school reunion. He was 92, I guess. He came to this reunion. And I made a presentation at the reunion to him, a picture of myself, he, and two other students that he took on a trip to, he took us on a week's hike in the White Mountains. I think it was my junior year in high school, something like that. And I remember Mother, I didn't have proper hiking shoes, so she got me some Boy Scout shoes. And they lasted about 3 days on those rough rocks, you know, that you're climbing over. The soles came detached from the uppers, and I remember John had some bed pins, and you know, these big safety pins, you know, you used to put through blankets, blanket pins, I guess they call them. And he put a couple of those through the upper and the sole to try to hold them together, but that didn't work too well. And the only other pair of shoes I had was a pair of slippers, and they had a new plastic called neolite, I believe. New plastic, and they're thin soles, but boy, they wore like iron. I wore them the rest of the week. I hiked in slippers. We had about 40 pounds on our back. And, so I made this presentation of a picture that we took up on the top of White Mountain by the steam train, the cog railway, you know. And he appreciated that. And I communicated him by email also. John Dodge, yeah, great guy.
What about you, Mother? What did you like studying in school?
What did I like studying, or what did I do well in school?
Well, whatever you prefer.
I did not like math, but I got through it. Struggling with geometry, which I did not like. But I made it, and I had a very understanding, helpful teacher. Algebra was fine, but not geometry. Forget it. And I liked foreign languages in high school, which is what I ultimately majored in French and Spanish, which was great fun. And the other thing I remember when I was very, very young, was not in school, was I vaguely remembered it when we moved into our new house. I was just 5 years old, and it was Christmas time, and our Christmas tree was on the lower level, and we had 3 bedrooms on the upper level. So I had been told to put on my new dress, which was dark red velvet. It was very pretty. And I, however, was very anxious to get it on and rush down and see what Santa had left me under the tree.
Bridget.
But there was no Bridgie under my tree. However, there were other things, but I didn't know what they were, so I decided I'd sneak down early, and I put on my beautiful new velvet dress. And rather than step down the stairs, which would be noisy, there was no carpeting or anything on them, I went down on my bottom, step by step, step by step. I finally got to the bottom, and my parents were in by the tree in the living room there. And I turned around to go into the room, and my mother says, "What did you do?" And I was scared. I hadn't done anything except come downstairs. But since I had come down the stairs, on which there was no carpeting, no treads, it was just plain wooden floors. And I had picked up dust from all the stairs, and it was all over the back of my new velvet dress.
Over here.
That's what Grandpa said.
So
Bridget, come here.
that did not start off the Christmas day very well. Not at all. And to that end of the time when I wore that dress before I outgrew it, I never liked it. That was the end of that dress. I never wanted to wear it again. I had very bad memories.
How about if you tell us how you and Bob DeSmith met each other?
About what?
How you met Bob?
Bob who? I met lots of Bobs. Is this running?
Yeah?
Oh, well, I better concentrate on just one Bob then, huh? It's snowing out, everybody. It was not snowing on Christmas Day yesterday, but it will today. Well, how did I met Bob? Well, it was very accidental in a way, the matter of timing. We both attended the University of Rochester, and they had what they call get-together reunions and things for new students in different schools and so forth. Because the men's campus and the women's campus were separate at that time. They had not joined into one university area. So I decided I'd attend this rally that was going on out in front of one of the buildings. And I had a girlfriend with me, and we went out and we stood around, and the boys from the boys' campus were there and everything, and I looked over and I saw this one guy. Well, I thought he looked a little familiar, but I didn't really know him. I looked again and I thought, yeah, I do know him. He went to the same high school I did. So I was with my girlfriend of mine, and I got up my nerve because everybody was getting together to meet everybody, new people, so on. And when I said, excuse me, did you go to Arundequite High School? And he says, yes. And I said, I did too. And then we got talking about what class we were in and everything. And it turned out to be my future husband. Hooray!
Very nice.
And not necessarily about the earlier days, but when I was very little, I remember one Christmas. Did I tell you before about my new dress?
Going down the stairs?
Going down the stairs?
Yes.
Yeah. It was awful.
Mm.
But also I remember very well, every morning my father would go out of the house, and we had lived on the front of our house was on a bus line, and he'd go out and he'd wait for the bus to come, and he'd get on the bus and go to work. And every afternoon about 5 o'clock, that same a bus anyway, a city bus would come along, he'd get off and come home and in the front door. But he always, for years, wore the same jacket. It was kind of I could find it now if it was in a lineup. It was dark red and dark green plaid, and it had a knit cap the same color, the dark red.
Talking about clothes, you might know.
And so one time, after watching for the bus to come home, for him to get off the bus, I looked out and several people got off, but there was nobody in that description of my father. I thought, oh, where did he go? Well, it turned out he'd gotten a new jacket for Christmas. I wasn't watching for him, I was watching for the jacket, and the jacket never showed up. But somebody else came home and in the front door. And I had to change my approach to who I watched getting off buses.
That's
We're talking about high school. And at our 50th anniversary, graduation anniversary, which Bev and I attended, I made a poem which I read to the attendees, and I called it The Passing of Old IHS. Now the high school we had was built in 1880, I believe. It was an old brick building. The number of students we had were way too many. We didn't pass fire code, but the town would not cough up enough money for us to build a new high school until after I graduated. So it was a drafty place. The wood floors were warped, and it was a terrible place. But anyway, to us it was something to remember. And I titled Passing of Old IHS. When memory keeps me company and moves to smiles or tears, a weather-beaten object looms through the mist of years. On the corner of Cooper and Titus it stood, back 40 years or more, while hurrying feet a path had worn straight to its creaking door. Its ancient red stone architecture was a type of classic art, but in the tragedy of life it played a leading part. And oft as modern daily burdens furrow my troubled brow, my thoughts return to those days of youth when life was simpler somehow. 'Twas in this storehouse of knowledge that our identities began to bloom. We learned the meaning of life itself in those drafty and decaying rooms. For some, that meaning was found between the leaves of lesson books, while others unravel the essence of life with smiles and cunning looks. The lexicon of youth was learned and caused our parents despair. We were referred to schmooze, the pervasive Kilroy, and called a nerd a square. Our pants were pegged, white bucks of gray. Whenever you had white bucks, you had to make them dirty. The first thing you did, you never wore them. You never cleaned them. The dirtier they were, raunchier they were, the better. White bucks of gray, adolescents far from dressy. For in the endless pursuit of knowledge, naught matters, spake Gin Alessi. Gin Alessi was a Spanish teacher. A nice lady. One recalls the surrogate parrots, those shepherds of the flock. John Dodge's experimental eggs you could smell around the block. He used to make, he used to put, well, it was hydrogen sulfide was what it was, but he poured something in something and made hydrogen sulfide. Oh God, what a stink. It was part of his chemistry class. Kate Reichel's elocution classes. Kate Reichel was an English teacher, and she would, on the side, teach enunciation, elocution, and she taught Ingrid Bergman how to speak better English.
Speak.
And yes, I remember well a tall one called Big Red Butler. Big Red was she must have been 6'4", red, flaming red hair. And because she was tall and she had red hair, we called her Cornell. Big Red. Also known as Cornell. Hazel Lalonde, she was the geometry teacher. The square of the hypotenuse equals the square of the other two sides. Coach Gordy, with one win, he was a basketball coach, with one win, 10 losses, and the rest of them ties. Helen Rice's study hall, who herself was a study of sorts, and Redma Mosier, who said, "Go out, men, and win, or else be good sports." But when the crust was on the sow and the sullen skies were gray, in sooth that building was no place one could wish to stay. The old radiators would clang and groan to heat up the great outdoors, while icicles clung to ceilings inside, pouring stalagmites on the floors. We chinked the drafty windowsills with ice-encrusted rags. The mice kept shelter in their lockers, eating lunch from paper bags. We all had a steel locker, you know, where you keep our books in, and the kids would, that brought lunch in, they put it in these lockers and find it half-eaten by the time it was lunchtime. The winter's chill began to fade. When winter's chill began to fade and spring brought sunny skies, Boys watch the girls spin their webs to catch the eligible guys. We were spared the demise of our Victorian home, laid waste by a wrecker's ball, as we climbed the ladder of success to fortune's beck and call. But ere I die, my thoughts return to those hallowed halls of yore, to seek the heart-entwined initials that I carved upon the door, and hear the old familiar voices of coterie from the past, to experience a feeling of deja vu before I breathe my last. Why don't you turn that thing off? I wean the old familiar ground to soothe my yearning breast. My life's move on, though you remain my dear old IHS.
Ah.
Yeah.
So you didn't know Mother at Rondoquoit High School. So whose initials were you carving in that heart?
Oh, that's poetic.
Just an expression, yeah, I understand. So, what else are we asking here?
I'm just checking off everything you've done.
Okay. So, what about, tell us about your wedding and your honeymoon.
It was a day much like this.
Well, you know, I was on leave from the Navy, and we made reservations at the hotel since we're in dry dock in the Navy
We got
ship,
married first.
Got married, yeah.
in the Navy shipyard. We decided that we would take 3 or 4 days in New York City. That was our honeymoon. So we flew down after the wedding on Allegheny Airlines, and it was snowing like crazy. I remember December 18th. And we get into New York and take a taxi to Hotel Roosevelt. And I don't think we had, I don't remember, I think since we had dinner before we left, we didn't have dinner, we just sacked out. And I remember in the morning, the maids outside were tee-heeing because it was 10:30 or so before we got up. They were tee-heeing outside because they knew it was a wedding party, I guess. But that night we ate at the Roosevelt room, and we saw Ronald Reagan at one of the tables. And we went shopping down Fifth Avenue. We went in a store, and there was a fire sale. Some guy came up, pulled her in, got a hold of us and pulled us in. He showed us this beautiful Irish linen tablecloth that we must have, you know. Gee, I thought the price was a little expensive. And I didn't have that much money with me, so we finally broke his grasp on us and went out. And later we saw the same tablecloth that was about $50 less expensive in another window, you know. But to make a long story short, there's too much honeymoon left at the end of the money, and I couldn't even pay the hotel bill. We were eating at the White Tower the last couple of days, and but I had my uniform, you know, and the guy said, "Oh, that's no problem." He said, "Just mail us a check when you get back." So, that's how we started out. I came back with about 25 cents in my pocket.
What do you remember, Mother,
About what?
about your wedding and honeymoon? Do you want to tell us about the wedding now that we've heard about the honeymoon?
Well, at the wedding, it was snowing, much like it is now. And after the wedding ceremony, I had planned to wear this other
Talk about clothes again.
this other coat that I had, but it wasn't very warm, and it was a blustery day, so I ended up wearing my mother's fake fur coat, which was much more comfortable. It looked much better too. So I was kind of glad it was a snowy day. And we're getting all kinds of phone calls here, along with snowflakes coming down.
Busy day.
Yeah,
Gosh.
indeed. Is this thing still running?
Oh yeah.
It is. Okay.
Oh yeah, we got
Yeah.
a lot more questions here.
Well, I can remember,
It was at Cutler Union we had the reception
yeah.
at the O Bar.
Well, I almost didn't go to that football rouser and the things in the event when I met Bob. But I ended up going, and if I hadn't, I don't know whether I would have met him as quickly or ever at that point. It's all history.
So then you started having children. Why didn't you ever have any girls?
Well, I don't believe that was my decision.
We did. We had Garina.
Karina.
Karina.
Yeah, it was supposed to be a girl.
He was.
That's why we called him Garina.
Well, to begin with, if anyone had ever asked me if I'd ever have this many boys, I probably would have said, oh, no way. It's not something you actually plan. But I do remember that after one of the boys was born, I think it was Gary had been born, and you always go back for a good physical checkup after the birth. And so I waited and I decided I really should go back. And I had instructions to make sure that I did a good checkup. So I went back to my endocrinologist, I guess it was, and I had a good checkup, and he says, I have my records here that you recently had a baby. I said, yes. He said, well, have you returned to having your normal monthly functions? I said, no. I said, and I guess that's one of my questions for you. I said, I haven't. Nothing has happened. And he said, well, something has happened. You're pregnant again. And I said, oh, well, don't blame me. So,
Endocrinologist?
what was he?
No, well, pediatrician.
No, pediatrician or children. For children, not for women.
Well, endocrinologist is for diabetes.
Your maternity doctor.
Whatever.
Yeah,
The
whatever.
one that takes care of your feminine functions. Whatever he was. But he was as surprised as I was.
And that was Ernesto on his way.
That was
Thomas
funny.
Charles. So, what were your most embarrassing moments as parents?
As parents,
As parents, yeah.
embarrassing.
Well, you know that, Mother.
No?
You know that story.
Huh?
When you were in Spain. When you were in Spain.
Yeah, so? What was embarrassing about that?
You were pregnant with,
Oh, you mean when I went to the drugstore?
yeah.
Well, the language kind of came into play. I can't remember exactly. It was not near our house. It was not where.
She She spoke fluent Spanish, you know, over
Mhm.
there. She
Yeah, but you don't know every little word.
no, oh, that's true.
Yeah. So, I went, I can remember exactly the route I had. It was kind of a long ways, and I had to walk there. And I walked and walked, and I finally got to the farmacia.
No, no, you tell them what happened. Your stocking started falling down. The elastic on your
Yes,
stocking.
well, I will when I get into the pharmacy. Are you telling this or mine?
Well, you
Anyway, I
didn't say why
finally
you were
found the
going to the pharmacy.
pharmacia, and I went in, and there was no department stores or anything around. So that was the only nearest place I thought I could get what I wanted. So I went in, and I thought, I don't know quite how to ask for this in Spanish, and so I asked him for a cordon, a cord, and he looked at me and he says, "Kind of late for this, isn't it?" And I didn't know what he meant. Well, it turned out a cordon was a prophylactic. And when I found out, I was so embarrassed. I thought maybe
The maid, she asked the maid, she says, you know, funniest thing happened. My stockings, the elastic broke on the top of my stocking, started coming down, and I wanted to get a rubber band to hold it up, so I went to the drugstore and I asked for a cordon, and the guy got embarrassed and shook his head. Of course, in a Catholic country, they're illegal to have birth control
Right.
things. So,
Yeah,
and she broke up. The maid.
that must have been embarrassing. How about the day in All Tears, Mother? The
Oh,
shoe store.
Oh. Well, that goes
you
back.
remember that?
That goes back a ways. Yeah. Whoa. Children always had to have new shoes when the school year began. You didn't wear your whatever you were wearing all summer. You didn't wear those. You had to buy new shoes. So there was an Altier shoe store not far away, and I took 3 boys with me, all get their new shoes all at the same time. And it had to be fitted. It took time, and the fellow would sit on his little stool and put your foot up and measure, and stand on the foot marker, and so on. And all this was going on. And meanwhile, there were 2 other boys with me that didn't want to wait and have that done. They were kind of walking up and down the aisle and getting slightly into mischief. And the very youngest at the time decided it would be fun to play like hide and seek on the chairs where you were sitting, so on. But he got a little rambunctious, and he climbed over the back of a chair.
This is Tom, right?
And he said, well, and there wasn't much else going on in the store, just a few different people scattered here and there. And he yells at the top of his voice, "Hey, everybody, come and tickle my fan." At that point, I grabbed all boys and promptly left the store with no new shoes.
I remember
You were
that.
there, right?
I was trying to get some shoes.
Yes.
The next thing I knew, I was being whisked out the door.
Yeah, you
Hey, dear.
Hey, dear, come and tickle my fan.
Oh dear, that was funny.
That was a good one.
Uh,
Those are pretty good. But it could have been much worse, I suppose, in terms of public embarrassment because of your children. What
Yeah,
other good questions
that was
did he
funny.
have?
Scar.
yeah.
Oh yeah, Red wants to know. I don't know if this question is answerable, but the worst car you ever owned.
Oh, I know that.
You do.
Yeah. As far as that was my opinion, I know. But you
Yeah.
asked Dad, not me.
No, you can answer too.
The Mercury.
The Mercury. Oh, that was way back in Webster.
Yeah, well, we lived
Well,
on
that was
Florentine
You
Road.
know, it was a good car, but it was way too heavy for the transmission. You know, they used a regular Mercury transmission, but the car probably weighed 1,000 pounds more than the other model, the later model that the transmission was for.
Yeah. So I backed,
And
A
they had push button, you know, it was a
Mhm.
push button transmission for drive and first gear and reverse.
I thought only Russian cars had that.
You know.
well, as I was saying, I backed out of the driveway just fine, pushed the button, reverse, went back out. And turned and I went back out so I would be facing forward the direction I wanted to go. And I, at that point, pushed drive button to go forward, and the car wouldn't go forward. It started to go backwards. So I thought, oh, pushed the wrong button. So I put my foot on the brake and I pushed them all, make sure everything was all right, and then I pushed reverse button again. Car didn't go forward. It just kept going backwards.
Well, that's because you pressed the reverse button.
And I pushed the drive button, and I pushed all the buttons. And then I pushed drive again.
Yeah, it was leaking, the transmission was leaking fluid.
Well, I didn't get very far there.
I never had bad cars really, but we would run them into the ground. Dad gave me his old Volkswagen,
Oh,
and
that's a trip.
it was pretty far gone by the time I got it. I used to drive it into work, and I was down the corner of West Street and Hop Meadow at the stop sign, and I was coming up to the stop sign. There was a guy ahead of me. We had the red light, and I put my foot down on the brake, and it went all the way down.
Was that his white one or his blue one?
No, it was a white one.
Yeah.
A white one. Pretty well rusted out, but I was going slow enough so that I tried the emergency brake quickly. That didn't work either because it was rusted. So I opened the door and I stuck my foot out and I stopped the car with my foot before I crashed into the guy ahead of me.
Oh.
And once I was driving that car, I think I was over by the dump, and you know, at that back road that goes by the Simsbury refuse area. I'm tooling along, and all of a sudden the seat goes like this, you know, and I'm staring up at the ceiling. The floor pan had all rusted out, and so I gingerly came back home with it. I cut that whole section sheet metal out with a pair of hand metal cutters, took the seat off, got a piece of plywood. Well, first of all, I took some strap iron, and I formed two pieces to go from the center transmission well, which was, you know, that was pretty thick metal, to the other side, which was also thick metal. I made a kind of a thing like this, and I had holes already pre-drilled in it, and I took wag bolts, wag screws I guess they were, and I wagged these two straps in, then I mounted plywood on it, and put the seat back, mounted the seat back, I got it. And I drove it for probably another couple thousand miles before
That was the blue Volkswagen.
no, that was a white one still.
Didn't you have to replace the floor in the blue one too at some point?
I don't remember. We had a green one. I don't remember.
No, you had a dark blue one that Gumpa gave you too.
Oh yeah.
That was the one that had the where you'd rigged up that interesting way of making the windshield wipers work.
Oh yeah. The windshield wipers wouldn't work, so I tied a string.
What was the car that was on the way to?
I tied a string to each wiper arm, and then threw the around the windshield to inside and tied it up. And so, but it would rain, I'd go across to move the wipers. Well, it worked. But
Oh, it worked great if you're driving with one hand in the rain. And with a car with an automatic a standard transmission. Oh, of course, there were some other classics you had there.
We had the Buick Buick Electra, and that had over 100,000 miles on it too. Beautiful car though. I used to carpool, it was my week to carpool, and I had 3 other guys in the car, and we get just before Hamilton Standard, and all of a sudden I heard a crack, and the back end went down like this. So we got in the parking lot. The guy said, "Hey, DeSmith, you better get that fixed, or we're not going home with you." So at lunch hour, I took it over to a garage, and he said, "Oh God, your frame is cracked." He said, "There's nothing I could do to fix this." So I called the Mark's Auto Parts. They give you $100 for a scrap car if you can get it there. So Bev comes down and after work, and she's following behind me with the other car, and I get down to the stoplight in front of the airport there, and all of a sudden she sees this big pool of transmission oil. The transmission drive had pulled out of the transmission, and all the oil was pouring out on the floor. And of course, I couldn't move it, so I had to pay Mark $100 to
Come and get
come
it.
and get it.
I was beeping on the horn. Oh.